Is Kieran Allen. Kieran Allen's a long-time member of the Socialist Workers' Party, and he's a sociologist as well. The structure of the meeting, the way it's going to work, is that I'll let Kieran speak for about 25 minutes. We'll have a few announcements then, and then I'm going to open it to the floor for questions, debate and discussion. So I'll just let Kieran take it away.
Okay. There was a student march there on Wednesday. About 25,000 students marched, and every single street off the march had a line of police. You have to understand, the USI is controlled by a bunch of Fianna Fáil hacks. They and the police essentially work together to marginalise a group of around, I think maybe 50 to 100 people broke away. And that tells you something. Just think of that, a student demonstration where student leaders are working with the police to stop any of these left-wingers causing trouble, and the police all the way down surrounding the march. This is a very controlled society. This place is very, very well controlled, and that's the pattern of our society. And the same applies to the media. I was talking to John Molyneux. I mean, I think the BBC is a pretty bad, biased, pro-corporate media. But if somebody's coming over here, if you like, look at the Irish media for the first time, you almost get used to it. The Irish media is extremely controlled, really, really controlled in terms of the debate. And over the last 3 years, what essentially has happened is that the interpretation of the Irish economy and what's going on in the Irish economy has been dominated by a very small number of economists. And it's their line and how they see it that is, if you like, continually repeated to the population, so it almost becomes the common sense. Who are they? People like Colin McCarthy, right? Colin McCarthy he's to the right of Maggie Thatcher. He thinks that social partnership is a form of Bolshevism. He's not criticising from the left, by the way, he's not an anarchist. He just thinks it's really bad, social partnership. He used to work for a group of consultants called DKM Consultants. DKM Consultants were a group of people who specialised in predicting what was going on in the building industry. So he knew all the figures when the house prices were going up and when they were just about to tip down. And just when they're about to tip down, lo and behold, he applies for a job in UCD, where he's now a professor, and lectures the population about how we have to have cuts. Right? He's one of the key people that come up all the time. John Fitzgerald. John Fitzgerald is supposed to be on the sort of slightly left of centre of the economic establishment. But this is a man who has continually said that he supports wage cuts, who got it completely wrong on the Celtic Tiger, who said it was going to continue to boom, and who has been predicting for the last 2 years essentially that the growth will be around the corner, it'll come up in the next 2 years, and who has consistently got it wrong. And these people dominate the debate, and then the other side of the debate, and this is where people often get confused, you get people like Constant Gurdjieff, or I think there's a new character from the Irish Financial Services now, Peter Thomas, I think is his name. But what you have to understand is these people are to the right. Although they sound like, cancel the debt and so on, these are people who believe in let capitalism rip. Let's have more destruction, let it go down the tubes, and it'll start to revive again. For those of you who follow it, they're into what's called the Austrian School of Economics. That means let it rip, don't have any safeguards. So the debate is dominated between the conventional economists and the right-wing economists, who sometimes sound a bit radical, but in reality, what their aim is to let Ireland go down the tubes in the hope that capitalism revives completely. Now, when we're looking at what the future of Irish capitalism is, every time I do these meetings, I always start with, I keep giving the evidence. Don't believe a word from these idiots, right? Do not believe a word from these idiots. They do not know what they're talking about. I'm just going to prove it to you again. I use different quotes every year when I do it. But this is this year's idiocy, right? So here, now, this country is run by the IMF. Okay? The IMF are supposed to know what's going on. This is what they wrote in April. That's not very far ago now, April. This is what the IMF said in April about what's going to happen in the world. The global economy is continuing broadly as anticipated. Earlier fears of a double-dip recession, which we did not share, have not materialised. So we're going to have a recovery. That's what the IMF said. A year ago, the IMF, our new masters, said that Greece has a sustainable level of debt. Everything's going fine in Greece. So these are the people running this country. They haven't got a clue about their own system, but yet they are presented as the experts, and the line they present is presented as the truth in terms of what's happening in our society. Now, what we have to understand is that The game that's played by conventional economists is to present the problem as a technical question. And I'm going to do a bit into technical language, I'll try to explain it as I go along, hopefully. So they talk about debt to GDP ratios. How are we going to manage debt to GDP ratios? And they give you all these mathematical stuff and the technical stuff. And what they never admit, never even talk about, is that this really is an argument about which class of people in our society are going to be made pay for the crisis. That word class, social group, never enters the head of economists. But that essentially is what has been happening. And when we look at the last 3 years, the Irish elite have been the most successful, possibly with maybe some of the countries like Latvia and Lithuania, I'm not so familiar with, in being able to manage the crisis in a way that they have saved as much of their wealth as possible and have transferred the burden of that onto the population. Let's look at how they've done that. First of all, NAMA. The establishment of NAMA was, this, for those not so familiar, this agency to take over the Irish distressed property market. The date on which NAMA was set up was essentially announced in advance to the developers through their links with Fianna Fáil. You look at the pattern between, for example, the 3 months before it was set up, and you find that developer after developer is transferring their property to their wives. Okay? And then the Irish government says, we cannot do anything about that. We cannot do anything about the fact that, for example, Jerry Gannon transferred 27 houses to his wife, Margaret Gannon, the proud owner of 27 houses. That cannot be done, so they were allowed to transfer the property to their spouses. And then, as one Fianna Fáil senator pointed out, they are then able, sometimes, to set up new companies and buy back some of that property at very low prices, often under different names. You look at Sean Quinn, the extraordinary story of Sean Quinn. The one good thing the Daily Mail has ever done is they printed a brilliant picture of Sean Quinn's mansion this week. Absolutely astounding picture. Sean Quinn, as you know, is now bankrupt, right? Now this is a man who, before he went bankrupt, managed to transfer 200 million of his assets to his relatives for the princely sum of €1,000 plus a laptop. 200 million given over to them, so nothing can happen and so on. He lives in a mansion, a palatial mansion, as the Daily Mail put it, with a garage which holds 9 cars, 2 or 3 jacuzzis, everything you can imagine in a palace, this man has it. And yet he will not be touched. He's preserved his assets as much as he can, and he will then, after 1 year, having declared himself bankrupt in Northern Ireland, be able to come back and operate again. So they've been very successful in, obviously there's been a certain destruction of wealth in any crash, but as much as possible, the state has assisted them to hold on to as much of their wealth as possible. In addition to that, the state has been able to shift the burden of paying for the recession onto the mass of the population. If you look at the last budget, for example, even before the coming one, in the last budget, the state sucked out of the economy, it sucked 1.4 billion from PAYE workers. PAYE, people who work were forced to pay up 1.4 billion through the universal social charge and through changing in the tax bands. By contrast, the corporate sector paid up about 200 million only, a fraction of what PAYE workers were forced to pay up. So continually, the cost of the adjustment is put onto PAYE workers. And the reality is that in terms of their own selfish interest, it is working. This has been a success for them. The most recent figures from the Central Statistics Office show that corporate profits in Ireland have risen by 2 billion in 2009 to 2010. They've risen from 35 billion to 37 billion. Profits are up in Ireland. So people tell you there's no wealth in Ireland, their own figures tell that is an absolute lie. But even though the profits went up, the actual investment last year continued to fall. Investment in the Irish economy by the people who control wealth has fallen by 71% in the last 3 years. But this hasn't happened in any country, bar, for example, America in the Wall Street crash. Investment last year down another 2 billion. So in other words, these people are making more profits, but they're not investing it in the Irish economy. So what are they doing with the money? What they're doing with the money is they're taking out of the country. Up to recently, up to about maybe 6 months ago, actually, they thought the safest place to put their money was in government bonds. That's why they're getting panics at the moment. So if you don't want to invest money, and you want a safe place, and you're a rich person, what you do you'll buy, for example, French bonds or German bonds especially, but you'll get a lower rate of interest. You will go back into the London property market. There's parts of the world where property is rising again, so you'll put your money back into that. Or you'll buy gold. The price of gold has shot up, so you'll hoard your money in various ways. That's what the rich have been doing. So in terms of their own selfish interests, this has been a success story. No doubt about that. Now, even though they have a success story, the other thing they've been very good at is they've been very good at spin doctrine. I mean, I think one of the recent political commentators says, this government here is probably the best at political management, presentation. That means telling lies and using PR people to spin a story. And the latest story is that Ireland, through this sort of carry-on, The Economist magazine said, Ireland is no longer part of the pigs. We had Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and wherever was Spain. Ireland is now out of that. The I has been replaced by Italy. So Ireland has got out of the trouble, and when it comes to the shakedown in terms of who is going to be in the strong euro and the weak euro, the idea is put across, listen, we're doing well, we're the good boys and girls of the class, we're going to be in with the North Europeans who are going to have proper euro, and this is actually a success story. And repeatedly, this is put out to people all the time. This is a success, just behave yourself, it is actually working. Now what I want to do really is try to show why that is a fairy story. And in reality, Ireland is going to go the same way as Greece, except it's going to do it in slow motion. And I think it's profound political implications for what we're going to do here. Let me just say a word about the Irish ruling class and how they think about the world and how they operate. It's their expression, it's not my expression. There's a sort of expression in Irish politics about being a cute whore. I don't know why people are called cute whore and so on. But you know, you're a bit of a scam merchant and you pull tricks and so on. And the Irish ruling, that's deeply embedded in the psychology of the Irish ruling class. They're cute whores. They think they can pull the scam and get away with it and get ahead of the posse before anybody finds out. Vincent Brown this week had an interesting article about wealth in Ireland, and he had a quote, I forget from where exactly, I think it was Global Wealth Report, showing, for example, the Irish Financial Services Centre. The Irish Financial Services Centre is one big scam. Because what it does is, it allows very wealthy people to pretend to have their wealth regulated, for example, the insurance industry or various wealth asset management funds, to pretend to have their wealth regulated, so it has that appearance of regulation, but then, through a complicated back office operation, to shift some of the money back into places like Bermuda or some of the tax havens. So the Financial Services Centre, there's a brilliant book, people read it, by, it's called Treasure Islands. It's about how, through the City of London, through Dublin, through places like Luxembourg, vast amount of money is put into these bolt holes for the rich, so will not be taxed. And that's what the Irish ruling class do. They play these games, and by playing these scams, they hope to be ahead of the posse. Now, what their strategy has been, let's just for a while analyse, in their terms, what is all this about, right? And there's really four elements to their strategy as they would see it and their argument over the last period. The first was to save the banks.